Good afternoon and welcome to Hillside House for this virtual leaving speech, brought to you by the Ancient Ash production company. I'd like to start by saying thank you to Ian and to Angela for looking after me for these past few years, and also a big thank you to Sean Cowles, for being that all-important best friend at Barnwood. He's kept me on the politically correct, straight and narrow, and we've had many a happy walk to the coffee shop where we've put the world to rights. Now obviously I love you all, but I want to give a special mention to Krupa and to Simon for the great crack that we had on the flux detector project, especially a couple of years ago. Also need to recognise Maro, who has remained my favourite project manager despite a late challenge by Barnaby. I've always felt it's been important not to be the last person amongst your peer group to leave. You always need somebody left who can say what a great job you did, especially on the Sizewell project or sorting out the NII audit for Dave Malaburn. I think I've just about achieved that. I remember my brother told me you don't want to be that poor sad old git left drooling in the corner who nobody knows what they did or really why they're still there. Now 49 years is a long time, and when I was a young man working at Littlebrook, helping Mrs. Thatcher break the miners' strike, or at Sizewell, I always enjoyed the job so much I really couldn't see how anybody could bear to retire. But what I've found is that as time's progressed, I've kept on the straight and narrow, but the company veers off, and one day you wake up, you find that the people that you work for are apparently endorsing a neo-Marxist organisation, and you no longer feel welcome amongst them. And so retirement becomes a release and a relief from the political correctness and the madness. I'm always reminded of the words of Gladys Knight and the Pips when she sang The Way We Were. And in the introduction she said, "Come to think of it, as bad as we think they are, these will become the good old days for our children. So children, it's over to you." We'll just take a short break. So obviously across the years I've gained a lot of OPEX, and I've given you a lot of that OPEX in the form of stories. So who can forget recruiting Miss Medway at Graham Power Station, or even Spanner at Littlebrook D. But there's one story that I've been holding back, and that's the Willington Power Station Electrical Maintenance Department heavy workshop door. Now this door was the type of door that you drive a forklift through. There's one over in Sainsbury's. And the idea is you drive the forklift at the door, it swings open, you get your motor into the workshop, and the door swings shut behind you, keeping the warmth in. That's the theory. What they found at Willington was they drove the forklift at the door, and the forklift took the door in front of it. They felt that the fittings, or where the fittings fixed into, was too soft. Now at that time I was a student apprentice in the CGB Midland region, and I went from power station to power station when I wasn't at university on assignments. And the nature of those assignments was that there tended to be a number of jobs which got passed from apprentice to apprentice, and that was the case with the workshop door. But in this case the electrical maintenance engineer said, "No more, Robinson, sort it out." And the proposed solution was that the door would, we put a door frame, weld it in place, weld the fittings to the frame, and everything would work fine. Obviously, what that didn't take into account was the weight of angle iron and the fact that the building wasn't quite square. Now, at that time, I was NJB staff, and the work was carried out by NJIC industrial staff, and we specified work for that staff via work order cards. Quite literally, it was a card. And how well we specified that work affected their bonus. They were on a pay and productivity scheme. And jobs like a workshop door, which was a one-off, you couldn't get a very good reference on. So they weren't really liked in terms of the bonus scheme, because they could quite easily lose their bonus if I got the job wrong. Which, as you've guessed, was the case here. And so I was summoned to speak to the welder on his tea break. Now there's a strange concept, isn't it? A tea break. And not only that, tea break wasn't taken in a canteen. What the industrial staff did was find a hideaway where they took their cup of tea and their snap, as it was called. In the case of the welder, that was in the industrial staff locker room, a place where generally I wouldn't go. But summoned I was, so off I set. I walked into the locker room, and the guys weren't sitting on benches, they were all sitting around the floor, smoking, drinking, eating, and obviously it felt deadly quiet as I walked in my brilliant white overalls. They might have been brilliant green, but I stood out, you can be sure, and sheepily made my way across to the welder. He told me his woes, and the only weapon I really had in my armoury was to write another work order card. Another card would mean more time, and more time could generate more money into the bonus scheme. And I remember to this day, at my suggestion, the welder fixed me with his steely blue South Derbyshire eyes, and to the quiet assembled mass quite clearly said, "I think the best thing you can do is fuck off." And I'm sure he'll be pleased that after 49 years and 7 months, I'm finally taking his advice. Goodbye, and thank you very much.